Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, Vince and I will be discussing how some high schools are throwing rejection parties to help kids cope with all of the denials they're getting in the college application process. Lisa and I will answer a question from a listener, and we'll have a final part of Lisa's interview with Dr. Christine Gangelhoff. Excellent interview on advice for music majors. And we'll close out with Sylvia Borgo from San Diego discussing what a wonderful opportunity the Semester at Sea program can be for students, parents, and even retirees. I'm here with Vince from sunny California, and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina at an Airbnb. Hey, Vince.
Hey, how are you doing, Mark?
Good. So getting excited tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. My daughter walks the stage. We got family coming in from Minnesota, Denver, Canada, and she graduated with a 4.0 for her entire time. So she did something nobody else in our family's done. That's for sure.
Congratulations to her. That's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So before we dive in today, Vince has a great tip. He shared it with me a few weeks ago. Got me kind of excited, and now he's going to share it with you. Go ahead, Vince.
All right. Well, the tip is when I'm working with families, and sometimes they're not familiar with the school, so I'll pull up EduRank, and when you check it out, it will list between 50 and 100 famous alumni. So I usually can pull that out, and I'll pull out some of the big ones, and people are like, really? And then it gets the family to look at the school. So I pulled it up first for my alma mater, Occidental, where we have a former president, Barack Obama, and we've had several vice presidential candidates, but the most recent one, presidential and vice presidential candidate, Jack Kemp, who also went to Occidental.
The funny thing, and I was just telling Vince this earlier, when Vince sent it to me, I was like, did Vince make the top 100 Oxy most famous reps of all time? But, by this time I started reading the presidents and the VPs and all that, I said, no, he's just sending me a really cool resource. You know what I like about this is the kind of thing that really helps when people haven't heard of a school. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times people will work off of the assumption if it was any good, I would have heard of it. But we all know there's great schools people haven't heard of. And so when you have a school people haven't heard of, having some of these sort of things like, wow, look at the great alum that have come out of there. That is a really good way to give a school credibility in people's minds.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because when you share that link, the mom might identify with one person or a couple people, the dad would identify with another couple people, and the student is just happy to see such a prominent and extensive list. So I totally recommend this when families are looking at schools they're not familiar with.
Yeah, and this is actually going to be both a recommended resource and a tip. So the link will be in the show notes for you guys to look it up. But it's also something that if you're curious, it's really curious too. Like just look up a school and see who their most famous alum are. Because absolutely. Inevitably you'll find people, you'll be like, oh, I didn't know they went there. So it's just kind of a fun little thing to do for if you got a little bit of time to kill or you're a little curious as well.
Absolutely. It's a great way to, especially like if you're on a group bus and you're doing a tour. A lot of schools offer tours for their students, or you could make it into a game when you're traveling with your family and you're going from school to school. Try it again.
Sounds good. So our admissions vernacular is the term coach speak. coach speak. And pretty sure you probably know what that one is. Vince, you wanna take a stab at explaining it? I'll give some examples for our listeners.
Now, is it coach speak or code speak?
No, coach speak.
Coach speak. I think that coach speak must have something to do with the way that coaches address players and athletes, and they have a certain vernacular that is true for the students that they're coaching and for the staff. That's what I would imagine it is.
So that's absolutely right in a general sense. In a more specific sense, how I'm using it, it has to do with the way coaches can talk when they're recruiting that can give a false impression. That's actually coach speak. So it can be something like, you are really talented, your future is really bright, and I'm really glad you came to our camp, to our ID camp, of which the player says, they're recruiting me. And that's not actually what they said, right?
No. I heard in the code speak what they were really saying. They were like, keep looking. We might be interested, but don't hold your breath.
Exactly. And so coaches are really notorious for that. And there can be mixed messages. Of course, we always, our human nature is to hear what we want to hear. So that kind of can lead to a toxic brew, right? We're already predisposed to hear what we want to hear. And then the coach oftentimes is doing one of two things, either trying to encourage a young player, or trying to keep them potentially warm in case they do find that they need them. And they do find they're interested in them eventually. And so the idea of building a little bit of rapport, so it can either be a way of encouraging a younger player or a way of establishing some rapport in case because maybe you are under evaluation and maybe the coach will eventually come after you. But when a coach wants you, they're explicit. Joy was recruited by 5 schools pretty hard, Division 1, 2, and 3. Now, the Division 1 school, that was when she was younger, and she was looking like she was on pace to maybe more of a Division 1 type player, North Carolina A&T. But one of the Division 3 schools, Virginia Wesleyan, I remember when we went to the ID camp that they had.
Yeah.
And she blew up at that camp. And then the coach came up to us afterward and said, okay, I am officially recruiting you. Like, it just could not have been more explicit, And when they really want you, it's really not ambiguous. You don't need coach speak, You'll know. And they'll also be communicating with you regularly.
Yes.
There'll be regular texting, communication. They'll invest their time. Head coach will get involved almost always. So, but there's a lot of talk around the edges, like I said, either to encourage a player or to keep them warm in case you decide you do need them. And that part of the athletic recruitment process is to ferret through the coach speak and to, because at first I remember when Joy was in the 6th grade, and this is probably why schools do this, because I still remember it. But she blew up at a tournament in Louisville, and then she got a letter from Virginia Tech. It was just a letter. They weren't recruiting her. But you get this letter from Virginia Tech in the ACC, and it feels like they're kind of recruiting you if you don't know what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
But how much time did it take them to send out form letters to, like, you know what I mean? Like, to 50 people at the camp, that they just cranked out.
Yeah, not much.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's one thing that gets people in trouble. They're recruiting me. Look at this letter I got. And a lot of colleges are smart because, I remember the first coach Joy ever played for. And she actually went on to play at William & Mary. But I remember her saying, I remember to this day, the first school that ever sent me a letter was the University of Iowa.
Wow.
Like, you remember. And when when I say that Virginia Tech letter, like, let's see, Joy graduated in class of 2017. So that's 6 years. So that was 2011. So, it's a little bit of ways ago. And I remember it like it was just yesterday.
Yeah. Well, that's a special moment. Absolutely.
They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, trying to get to kids early and trying to make you remember, hey, I'd like to be the first one that this player ever remembers.
Yes.
But it's meaningless if it's just some type of form letter. It's when they really put time in and invest time That's always the thing. What, like, one school that recruited Joy hard was Oglethorpe in Atlanta. They would, most of the time the players will come to like the AAU games because you can see all kinds of talent in one place. But they're like consistently coming to your high school games in the middle of the season. The coaching staff, they're in. But that's, coach speak is tantalizing talk that might make you think they're interested, but it's very different from, okay, we are officially recruiting you.
Yes, yes. And one thing I would say about that is I think that coaches can drop in and out of that coach speak when they're recruiting a student, because suddenly they see someone else and then you get, a drawback. So I have experienced students who have had people who were really, really interested and then drop into less interested, less time spent, and then re-engage like they've been dating you for 5 years.
Yeah, because the thing is, what they're not going to tell you, and sometimes you just have to actually just outright ask, is where am I in your recruiting priorities? So they might know that they have like two offers at your position, and in their mind, you're the number 4.
Okay.
But then all of a sudden, 1 and 2 commit elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now you just moved up to number 2.
Yeah.
Because I've seen this happen a lot. I've seen communication. I've also seen the opposite, where, communication is coming just constant texting. Then they just drop you like a hot potato. And they recruited over you and got somebody higher ranked and got them to commit. And now you're like, on the outs. And so it's a business.
Absolutely. It is a business, and it's a dance and a negotiation and a wish and a prayer.
I've often mentioned my 2 favorite books about college admissions in terms of like explaining how the sausage is made, and it's Who Gets In and Why by Salingo, as well as Valedictorians at the Gate by Rebecca Sapke. And I recently blew through both of them again, just as audiobooks, as I've been traveling a lot. And I missed this the first time, but it hit me this time. There's a point where each of them says, the point about this whole book is to understand it's a business. Like, they both basically came to the same conclusion that it's a business and schools do what's in their interest first. And no, they're a nonprofit business, so they have a mission, but they're first and foremost concerned with their own health. There's still buzz about Christoph Gutentag at Duke when he was at College Board. I think it was more than a decade now ago. But somebody was going on and on and on about, it's not fair and it's not fair and da-da-da-da-da. And he just stopped everybody. He said, since when did you ever think it's more about you than about us? We're first and foremost concerned about us.
Wow.
And while it was really controversial, people were like, how dare he? How dare he? Did you hear what that man said? There was a whole other half of the room that was like, such candor is refreshing.
Yeah. He was always bold, and he could be blunt for sure, but at least you knew where he was coming from.
Yeah, I find that, and I'm excited that he's coming on the podcast because I find he never disappoints with some level of candor and transparency that often others are guarded from. And I think those voices are the prophets in college admissions to me. Those are the ones that really help the listener understand how, for lack of a better words, how the sausage is made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that candor is refreshing, and I can't wait to listen to that episode.
Cool.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Well, Vince, we're going to transition into an article, and this is recently appeared in the New York Times, and it's actually a student opinion paper, so that's a little different than what we normally read, and it's actually so short that I think I want to just read it, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
and then we can discuss it.
Absolutely.
And so it says, how do you get over your rejection? Of course, the context is college admissions. And then the subtitle, would you want to attend a rejection party? Question mark. And it goes on to say, at the annual rejection party at downtown Magnets High School in Los Angeles, seniors, and it mentions a couple students, were invited to shred their college rejection letters in exchange for an ice cream sundae. So that's the teaser. So it's by Michael Gongchar, April 26, 2023. Shout out to Heidi Gray, one of our regular listeners who sent this in. And I thought this would make a great article for us. So it says, life is full of rejections. When trying out for teams, applying to schools, hunting for jobs, and forming relationships. For high school seniors participating in the college application process, rejections can be painful and brutal. What are your strategies for handling the inevitable rejection? Do you bounce back easily, or does the sting go deep? Do you take rejection personally, or do you see it as a normal part of life? And this is actually a title, which is pretty cool. This is the actual title. In Sorry You've Been Rejected, Now Let's Party. That's the formal name. In Sorry You've Been Rejected, Now Let's Party, Danielle Braff writes about a school in LA that throws an annual rejection party each spring for high school seniors. At downtown Magnets High School in LA, mid-April, Linda McGee, one of the school's college counselors, checked her paper shredder. She needed to make sure that it had all the optimal sound effects, loud, obnoxious, and finite. Soon her high school seniors would parade into the room, clutching rejection letters from colleges across the nation. And those papers need to be masticated as dramatically as possible. You have to learn that you will survive, and there is a rainbow at the other end, said McGee, who started the school's rejection party a decade ago and has been fine-tuning it ever since. Today, about 1/4 of the senior class attends the party. The only ticket to get into the party is a rejection letter. You have to print it out because there's no satisfaction with deleting an email, says McGee with a laugh. Each student takes a turn announcing the name of the college that scorned them before putting the letter into the shredder as others cheer. Then they receive an ice cream sundae and pledge to not be defined by the college they attend. Ice cream heals all wounds, Miss McGee said with the confidence of a teacher who has done her research. The student with the highest number of rejections, this year it happened to be 17, receives a gift card to Barnes and Noble. So Vince, that's the total article. What do you think?
It's a great article because I think everyone needs a place to put that dejection, that disappointment, those moments when you were hoping against all odds, especially with that one student who applied to Princeton and other schools. You need a place to do that. And it sort of reminds me of one of my students who she hit most of her middle and certainly her likely options, but she didn't hit anything in her reach. And she talked about an experience that she had with another friend who was in the same situation from the same school. And it was as if they had read this article because they pulled out the ice cream. They didn't exactly burn it, but I will say, I think that they ripped them up into little shreds and then let it go. So I love the group mentality piece of this, where you get people together. There's no shame. You let it go. You're able to move on. You have good times. And you also, if you're doing it in a group, you realize that there are other people there who had the same experience. And some of them had more rejection than you experienced. So it starts to contextualize the experience, and it allows you the opportunity to place your emotions about what just happened into some type of context. So I love this idea.
I love it too. I think it's absolutely brilliant. If this principal out here is listening, he needs to give her like a $10,000 bonus. I'm sorry. I mean, this is pedagogy at its finest. You know, I was having a conversation, it was maybe about 6 weeks ago, and I can't remember if it was Julia or Susan, but it was one of the two, one of our two co-hosts.
Yeah.
And I was saying to them, you know, sometimes kids are really, really struggling and they take a rejection really hard. But I found there's one thing that really helps them. And then whichever one of them it was, because I talked to both of them a lot, so I'm sorry that I'm confusing them. They guessed it. They said, let me guess. They find out a lot of other students at their school also aren't getting in. I'm like, bingo. I have noticed that. You know, that's one of the things that helps the most when especially if it's someone who they looked at as really strong academically. You know, that kid they thought would get in everywhere.
Yep. Yep.
And you know, I remember way back in undergraduate, you know, and I had my undergraduate degree in psychology, and we were studying the concept of, is it true that misery loves company? And we were looking at some of the research on that. And I remember reading a research study that showed that misery loves miserable company. In other words, there's misery doesn't necessarily like hanging out with the person that won the lottery.
Right. Amen.
Right. So there's just there's something to be said for knowing that you're not the only one on the boat stranded all by yourself, all alone.
Yes.
Once you know, oh, wow, there's another 100 people there like me that feel the same way, same emotions. And I actually think it's brilliant, like calling the names out like she has. I think there's an aspect of that that just like takes some of the sting out of it. And then I just think it's brilliant. Like, give the person with the most the Barnes and Noble card. Now let's go eat. I mean, what a life lesson that in life you don't always get what you want, but can you see the glass half full and half empty? Can you celebrate your acceptances? Can you let stuff go? Like the rest of your lives, you're not always going to get the job that you want. You're not always going to get the promotion. You're not always going to get the girl that you ask out or the guy.
Yeah.
You know, so you may not be able to afford the dream house or the car. You know, like it's not always going to work that way. So learning now that lesson, and for a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds, this is like the first time they've really experienced what may feel like rejection or something that feels this personal, something they might have worked really, really hard for. But I just think that, you know, there's a reason why so much of therapy is group therapy, right? It's just that concept of you're not alone in the boat. You're not alone in the ship. There's others like you. And then I even like the idea of just like, let's turn it into a party. Let's have fun with it, you know? So I think that this is such a great idea that honestly, if I was in a school setting, I would mimic it. If I was a college counselor in a school setting, for you college counselors out there that are school-based,
yep.
I'm not telling you what to do, but I think you should consider doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's just something about removing a stigma when you face your giants too, and just take them right on, and rather than just go hide.
Well said. I love that. I'm going to tape that to my little wall here. Take down the giants. And face them. That's great. Yeah, this process is terrific because it's something that any community, any school, you know, whether they're, you know, most of the students are going to, you know, really selective places, or you're working in a large school setting. This type of opportunity can be created easily and replicated at any kind of school environment. And I think, you know, having an independent practice, it would be harder to
Sure.
mirror this because, you know, the students I have are from all over the place.
I know.
It would be weird.
No, because same thing, Vince. Like I would have tried to do it right now but you know, our students are national, and
Yeah.
it just kind of really wouldn't. And I also think, I mean, I guess you could have your own ice cream over on a Zoom call, but it's not the same. Not the same.
Yeah.
You know, there's another thing I like about it too. It said 25% of the class attends. I think this is the kind of thing loses all its impact and import if you require it. Let it be voluntary. Let the people who want to come, who see who can see the beneficial nature to it, let them be the ones to participate. As soon as you make things like this required, then you get the, disgruntlement and the resentment.
Yeah, yeah. And you might get somebody there who isn't ready to move on and can bring the whole vibe down,
Exactly.
if they're made to be there. So
Yeah.
I would let that, let those who want to face the giants today come, but the ones who are not there yet, let them, do what they need to do to get there.
I just thought about something. This doesn't have to be a big thing orchestrated by a teacher. This could be like 3 or 4 parents together that all are friends and their kids are friends, and they get together and they do it with, 3 or 4 in small groups.
Absolutely.
And it can be just as effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think in some ways it might be more effective because, the people are close and it's easy to put together, and it doesn't have to be a public thing, because sometimes, in the high school setting, there's, in talking with the student recently that I described earlier, there was one other person at her school that was, I don't think that they know that they're her nemesis, but they were very successful. And I think if she'd had to be in a group setting with that particular person who was celebrating very boldly, it would have. I don't think that she would have gone, because she would not want to experience that in front of that one person.
Mm-hmm.
So creating our own party was good.
Yeah, and it could be small. It could be 4 people. The there's another component of this that I like, and that is when people get rejected by a school. I mean, it's human nature to sort of start doubting yourself a little bit, but when you start to hear the names of the other places that people are rejected at, there's a normalizing of it. Like, what they're basically doing is they're making rejection normal. They're saying this is the norm, not the exception. So why you fretting? And that piece of it, it takes the sting. It helps, look, time helps heal wounds. So I'm not trying to say that this is some elixir that you go home that night and you never have, a shed tear or a downcast feeling. I'm not saying that, but that piece of it, and it's once again, I know I said this before, it's especially true when someone tends to look up to somebody else and think, wow, that kid didn't get in there.
Yes.
Maybe it's not me. Maybe these places really, really are hard, and maybe I didn't have proper expectations. So, that's all I had today, Vince. Short and sweet, but I thought this was a good one.
Yeah, it was great. I really appreciate you bringing it up, because, maybe as we go into the fall, we can, or January, come back to this for a minute and remind people, set that party up, that voluntary party.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
Whatever it's going to be. So,
I love it. And listeners, keep sending articles in. Like so many of the articles we discuss, they come from you, our listeners. You've come across something, it hits you in a way. We can't promise, but I do notice ones that really resonate out there. I'll usually get like 5 people will send them. Then I'll be like, okay, that's kind of how I know there's like a buzz out there. 5 people sent this article, and there's a buzz out there. We need to talk about it. But sometimes it's just the one-offs. Like maybe just one person sends it, but I can tell, like, I really think our listeners would like it. So keep sending them in. At a minimum, if I haven't read it, it's good for my own personal edification. A lot of times I'll send them out to all our co-hosts in a group. Vince knows this. We've got a pretty active email and text thread for the 7 co-hosts. And we're always exchanging articles and thoughts, and we bounce questions off each other. We use each other as a little bit of a think tank. And so we're always trying to, sharpen our own skills and stay abreast with what's out there. So keep sending stuff our way.
All right.
All right, my friend. See you in June.
Can't wait.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, I love doing the chit chat with you, but I want to just dive right in on this one. So,
okay, folks, no chit chat for you.
No chit chat today.
No chit chat. All right. Although I suppose we're chit chatting about chit chats, I'm just going to get to the question.
True. I can count it as chit chatting.
That was chit chat for sure. This question is from somebody we know and love, Bobbi from Ohio. And Bobbi
Hey,
from
Bobby.
Ohio writes, please address how students live out of state get to the airport. My student got all excited about App State because her favorite band started there and the indie music scene is really strong, but it's in the middle of nowhere. If schools are seeking geographic diversity, it would be helpful to know if they facilitate travel home.
So I think this is a great question, Lisa, because transportation is important to people. Getting to the school is important to people. A lot of times, a student, if they're coming from a distance, will be flying into an airport. And that's a question, like, how does my 18-year-old daughter get from this airport to the school? But what I would say is that colleges are very much aware of the fact that this is a concern, and most of them have set up some system to address it. So here's an example. So when I was at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, and we drove on a 5.5 hour bus ride, that we took from Tacoma, you really get a chance to see, well, man, I'm kind of out here in the hinterlands. And so one of the questions that kept going through my mind is, how are my students going to actually get to this place? So when we got there, I had a lot of questions for them about that. Because I'm like, this is like a really good school, but this is a really big problem. And so when I asked them the question, one of the things they said is that, well, you don't have to fly like into Portland or Seattle. There's another airport called Pasco. And they run shuttles to Pasco constantly. They also talked about like a transportation option that was like under $5. But the point is, like, they had really thought that through.
Right.
And I find schools do this. Like, they'll run shuttles during the major breaks to the nearest airport. And maybe there's a $35 fee, you check the fees out, but it's a lot better than an Uber and safety issues and all that. So the point is, don't just assume that your kid is on your own to have to do a 150 Uber ride for a couple hours or something to get to the place. Like, because normally colleges have worked out something with the closest airport, some type of transportation arrangement that families are comfortable with.
Right.
And that is very, very common. It just would be too deleterious to their admission efforts if they sort of said, like, hey, you're an adult now, figure it out. Like
right.
It just would not be good. So they have thought through this. I consistently hear that at schools,
right.
And normally I see like shuttling people to the major airports. Like, let's just use Whitman again. They do shuttles both to Portland and to Seattle and to Pasco during all the major holidays to take that issue off the table.
Right.
For people. And they're more isolated than App State is.
Right. Yeah. When I read this question with Mark, I was like, well, App State isn't in the middle of nowhere. And then I realized I've been in North Carolina for too long and my definition of nowhere has completely changed. But I did take a quick Google on the App State website, and they do have several options. And Bobbi, your daughter could take the Hickory Hop airport shuttle. It leaves 6 times daily, and takes your kid right from App State to the Charlotte airport.
I'm impressed. You went and found the Hickory Hop for us today.
Well, this is not so much of a college thing, but I love, do you ever use this website called Rome to Rio? It's www.rome2rio.com. And you can put 2 places and it tells you all the different ways you can get from point A to point B, how long they take, how much they cost, how much hassle it is. And so it's really a very useful website that I use all the time. Because number one, I have no sense of direction. And number two, it's just kind of can short course a lot for me very quickly. So Rome to Rio is another good resource. But the colleges, if you look on their websites, like in the parents part of it, they will almost always have that. And Elon, for instance, has shuttles. They run shuttles during the holiday to both the Greensboro and the Raleigh airports. They run like every couple hours and you can reserve them and they're not very expensive. So most colleges, as you say, do things like that.
I agree, but you have been in North Carolina a while because while you were doing that, I did a little Google search, and Boone to Charlotte is 101 miles.
Which is like nothing. It's like
That's
nothing.
a lot. That's a lot for a kid coming in.
That every day.
Yeah, but you're driving in your nice little SUV. This is an 18-year-old that's flying in from Ohio, and there's nothing really around that. Like Hickory, no, that's not going to be an airport. Greensboro, no. Johnson City.
There's a Greensboro airport. I mean, Lily flies out of it all the time.
Okay, but even Greensboro to Boone is almost 100 miles. So that's not. So Charlotte is still going to be your best bet.
But I'll tell you something. Sometimes we drive to Charlotte to take flights from Raleigh because there are no direct flights. So I guess, and it's even farther for us. So I guess that's what I'm saying. My definition of far has changed.
I can totally get that because I'm always trying to convince my kids to come back to Atlanta. One's in Charlotte, one's in Raleigh. And one thing I try to do is the hassle of the flights.
The airport is key. I did not realize that before I moved here. Key.
Yeah, I mean, Joy trying to get from Raleigh to Detroit is like, oh my goodness, it's like either like 2 to 3 flights or $500. It's like crazy. Yeah. And I'm like, Atlanta's got these specials, tons of direct flights. And I mean, I know I'm spoiled. I'm at the busiest airport in the world here, but on the other hand, I like an airport that's not busy when I land on the other side.
Oh, yeah. Well, going from living, in the O'Hare airport hub, number one, you could fly direct anywhere. We never thought about connect. I mean, it just wasn't even a thought in my head that would be something a person would need to do until I moved here. And then I realized it was going to be something I had to do.
Right.
But on the other hand, the Raleigh-Durham airport is so chill.
It is
clean and nice. And it goes through security so quickly and everyone's so happy there. It is. Whereas O'Hare, I just walk in and I just feel like there's a collective panic attack happening all at once.
I mean, Hartsfield-Jackson is the same. The last time I flew out of Raleigh, I kid you not, I went to go through security, and I don't even think I was using my TSA pre-check. I was the only person. Literally, there was nobody in front of me.
Yeah.
I've never had that in my life before.
Yeah. No, it's very mellow. I really love that. So, it's trade-offs to everything.
Sure. So back to Bobbi and to any other listener. So what we would say would be check with any school that you're interested in. Ask them what the transportation options are, especially if you're looking at flying. Find out if the school provides shuttles. Find out what setup they had, and I'm quite confident you're going to find, unless you're just like half an hour or something away, but that school has put a plan in place because you just would lose you would lose kids if you don't do that. It's much better to put something in and, in there. And, I think you'll find from my experience that there's a wide range of what the cost structure is. Some people have built this into the cost and they eat the cost. Like Whitman had really done that. They'd put it in there and they just eat the cost on that because they know it would be a deterrent. Versus sometimes I've seen places where they were a little on the pricey side. And people are using the shuttles, but there's a little grumbling on, from the parents about, man, do you see what they whacked the student account with? So it's all part of your research as you try to compare schools. And it just shows the multiplicity of things that you really need to look at when you're trying to assess, fit, and match.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, see you next week, Lisa. This was good.
All right. See you next week.
All right. Bye.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you've enjoyed this interview with Dr. Christina Gangelhoff as much as I have. And in this final part, Christina talks about the timeline for auditions and really the entire process. What about the student who loves music but doesn't want to major in music? Christina addresses that person. Christina shares some hidden gem schools that fly under the radar for music majors. And she closes by sharing her advice for parents, students, and college counselors. Listen and enjoy.
So is there a different timeline for musicians in terms of their application process and when they receive decisions?
It can be. So basically, again, it depends. So some schools do have an option for early action, and I really encourage students to do that if they can, if they're ready, because it's really important to do as much front loading as possible. So a lot of the writing, if you can get that started in your junior year, and working on the essays, and a resume is also a really important thing to have. A lot of schools actually require that. And even if they don't, I make students do one because you can use that for your activities list and as much as you can do in advance. Because once you get into the application season, you get the application that you have to first do the university application, the music application, all those essays. And then the pre-screen is usually around the same time as the application or a little bit later. And then when most students are done with that and they're just waiting for the results, music students then have to go into the audition part. So it's like they can't let their guard down. Then they have to really crank up the practice. And so auditions often, they can be as early as December, but it's most common in January, February, some schools as late as March, but typically January, February. So it's very much more spread out.
Wow. So it's really a whole almost academic year of applying and being prepared in different ways.
Yeah.
Now, let's say if it's a student who loves music, but decides, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. I don't think I want to major in music, but I still love music and I want to explore it in college. Like, what kind of avenues do they have?
There's a lot of options for that. And sometimes that can be a better solution. So a minor in music is available at many, many institutions. And that can be a great way for students to still be musically active. And it can work really well with specific degrees. And so somebody who's a business major or medicine, again, that's a great way to go. Pre-med, creative writing, film, a lot of these things, they can have a minor in music and it can really complement the major and it can make them more employable in a lot of ways. And a lot of times for a music minor, you don't have to audition. And it depends on the program, but sometimes you would have to audition for this particular studio. That can be a requirement. That's also true in some BAs that don't require an audition for the program, but you have to audition for the studio of that teacher. So music minors can be like that in some regards. And then students who even want a less of a commitment, if they have a really, strict academic load or a heavy load, they can just participate in ensembles and music clubs. A lot of universities have music clubs. And I'd say most of the time, large ensembles like band, orchestra, choir often welcome, non-music majors. And in fact, a lot of them have scholarships that is for instruments like, not the instruments that aren't so common, like bassoon, some of the, double reeds, sometimes French horn. It depends on the school, of course, but some of those instruments that aren't as popular and numerous can get scholarships, even if you're not a music major. And marching band and pep band are also really popular for non-music majors.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Just very fun.
Yes. You get to be involved in the school in a different way with that too. So
yeah, exactly. And it really keeps the fun in music. And so a lot of people love music, but they're not prepared to just dedicate to that level of rigor and commitment. And that can actually take the joy out of it for them. And that's the last thing that you want to happen. And if somebody's at a good level already, or even if they're at a beginner level, they can take lessons a lot of times. So you can still register and take lessons. Some schools you can take lessons, you would get lessons with a graduate student. So if you're a total beginner, you can take lessons with a grad student. You wouldn't be with a professor, but the grad students are usually very qualified. And so there's just so many different opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good that, for the whole range of kids who are interested in music, there's something there for you at your level in college.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and it's actually a nice balance too, to have a mix, because that way music students get to intermix with non-music students, and it's just a different dynamic. So I think the more diversity in that regard is all the better.
Absolutely. Now, I know it's hard because I'm sure things are very specific to different instruments and styles of music, but do you have any hidden gem schools for kids who want to major in music? Places that you think that aren't on the radar of most people but should be?
Yeah, I can throw a few out there. So one that I'm always a big fan of is Middle Tennessee State University. And I think I mentioned that when we talked, that I have a funny anecdote about it, that a good friend of mine who's a prominent musician in New York went there to present a masterclass to the flute studio. And he said he thought, oh, it's going to be in the middle of nowhere, and it's just going to be this quaint little place. And he said he was just so shocked, and that the students were so engaged and at a really high level. And then he was hanging out with them afterwards, and he said, oh, what do you guys do in your spare time? And he thought it was going to be like, oh, go to the movie theater or something. And, oh, we write grant proposals, and they have all, they were working on these different grants and these technology projects. And it's a program that's really very much equips students with real world skills. And I just think that's so important. And they just have a really diverse array of offerings for students. And I really love that about that program. A couple others I can throw out there. I know recently on your show, you were featured University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Wasn't that one of the features?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
when he was talking about the different programs that are kind of the flagship programs, I'm like, come on, mention music. And he didn't. And I was like, why didn't he mention music? But they have an excellent music program. And it's very impressive. It's really large. They offer everything. They offer everything. And it's one of those schools that it has something for everyone. And again, students have so many opportunities in other disciplines because they have so many strong areas. And while I'm in Illinois, I have to throw a shout out to Northern Illinois University, which, and their claim to fame is they had the first bachelor's degree in steel pan performance. So, yeah. So that's
fabulous.
Yeah, it's incredible. And they have the faculty that lead their steel pan program are from Trinidad, and they're amazing. They're just world-class musicians. And then a couple others I'll throw out: University of Puget Sound, and it's a gorgeous campus and a perfect setting for a student in a really well-rounded education. And then San Jose State University, I just read, is ranked #1 affordable music school. So
cool.
Yeah, I thought that was a kind of a nice tip to know. And I checked, and their BA degree does require audition. So like I said, some don't and some do, but theirs in particular does. And then the last one I'll say is Western Connecticut State University. And that's another really great music program. It wouldn't be on the top of everybody's radar. And they have an amazing facility. Like if you go on their website, they have a tour of their facility, and that's incredible. So those are some programs probably many people have not looked into.
Yeah, those are great. What about for students who aren't going to major in music, but they still want to have lots of opportunities to explore music in college?
I mean, I would say almost any school that they look at that has a music program is going to have that, with the exception of if it's a really small program. And sometimes if a student is interested in for example, musical theater, and it's a small school, those auditions would be open to the musical theater students only. But the bigger programs a lot of times they'll open auditions for anybody on campus, and sometimes even people in the community. And so there's almost always opportunities of some sort. But they can easily find out if they're looking at a school for a different program. They can just go on the music website and then just look at admissions requirements, my opportunities for none, or you can just even Google it and it will bring you probably quicker to the page. But, and I also just want to emphasize when I'm saying that, like the website of the music school is the most important place that you want to go, because that's where you're going to find the most up-to-date. And you sometimes you have to dig deep, like you have to go multiple pages in to find these requirements. And if you can't find it, you can always email admissions, the music admissions person, one of the professors, and ask them just to confirm that there are opportunities. And pretty much always they welcome that. It's pretty rare that you can't.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, in my conversation with Vince in the news section today, we said the recommended resource was going to be EduRank's listing of notable alumni as a great way to learn about colleges and who are the alumni they produce. And the easiest way to find that actually is just to do a Google search. In fact, Lisa and I just got back from doing college visits at High Point and Elon. So I thought I would look them up, and that's what I did. All you do is do a Google search and you just put in EduRank, that's EduRank, notable alumni, Elon University. In that case, 21 pulled up. And so I encourage you to do that to learn about the alumni of schools of interest to you. We will now return to the final part, Lisa's interview with Dr. Christina Gangelhoff.
You know, we always ask every guest what advice that you can give to our listeners, and they usually consist of parents, students, and college counselors. So for parents, what advice would you have for them?
Well, for parents, a lot of times I just tell them it's going to be okay, because they're, just like we've talked about, they're so stressed that their child wants to go into music, and that is this right for them? And they're, just like I've said, there's so many different pathways that students can go, and there's always something right. And if the student that's their dream and their passion, you don't want to force them to do something else. And so, but at the same time, sometimes parents can, it's their child. So of course they're going to think they're very talented. And so they have to be able to talk to someone, whether it be the student's teacher or a counselor or consultant or something, to kind of assess, is my child really cut out for this? And, just to get the right advice, because the last thing you want is to get them in a program where they're going to be miserable. So, but there is a path for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And then what about for students?
Okay. So for students, the biggest thing is to be open and flexible, and just to have an open mind and to explore all of these different possibilities, and not to just be focused on one thing that you want to do, because there's so many things that you don't know even exist. And then the other advice I would give them has to do with auditions. And the advice is to don't panic if faculty stop you in the middle of a piece, or if they ask you to do something differently, or if they ask you a question about a composition or something that you created. That's a good sign. So you don't want to take it as like they're criticizing you. So the biggest thing faculty are looking for is a student who is open and teachable, because they're not looking for a finished product, a polished product, because they don't want to see somebody who has, of course, they want to see a high skill level and dedication and everything. But if they see somebody who's resistant to any kind of suggestions, or who's not flexible to trying something, that likely that student wouldn't get into that program. So it's really important to take that advice and to really take it to heart, and to be open to trying to what they're suggesting to you.
That is great advice. So what about for college counselors?
College counselors, I'd say the biggest thing is just to make sure that you have somebody who can help with the artistic side. There are many consultants who do have they've had some expertise, and they, depending on the situation, they can handle it, or they can just run it by somebody. Some of them prefer to hire somebody or work as a co-consultant, and the family actually hires both. I can also suggest to work closely with a student's teacher. So a lot of times music students will have a private teacher. If they're pursuing music, a lot of the time they'll have that in place already. And to work with a teacher and kind of say, what do you think of the student's level? You could even run some schools by them, so that they can be a great resource. And the only danger with that is sometimes a teacher can be an amazing teacher, but they can have been out of university for decades,
Right.
and have no idea of the current landscape. And so they can be kind of delusional, and they can say, oh yeah, like this school, they'll get in no problem. Because I've had that happen with teachers, and they suggest schools, and the schools are really far off. So you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and rely on them for their expertise, but just be aware of where they may be as far as understanding the current academic climate.
No, that's excellent advice. It's clear from listening to you and from talking to you earlier that this is an incredibly complicated process, and it probably, requires a high level of expertise to guide families and students through this process. So, I definitely think that we need to get help as consultants if that is not our area of expertise. Well, as you know, as a listener, no guest gets away from being on the hot seat on your college-bound kids. So I'm going to just throw out a few questions, and so we can get to know you a little better.
Sure.
All right. So I am curious, like you've had such a great career as a musician, as a professor, as a consultant. What would you do if you couldn't do any of those things?
That's an interesting one. It's so hard for me to imagine anything else, because I was one of those people who I always panicked, like, what if I got injured? There's nothing else I can do. Like it's my life. But I am also kind of obsessed with the medical field. And so I could see myself going into that, because I'm really health conscious, and I love sports too. I love biking and hiking and all these different activities, and how they all relate, like orthopedics and also physical therapy, like all of those fields, because they actually tie in really closely with music. So I feel like music and sports and medicine is like, it's all kind of linked in some way. So I would definitely be drawn towards that, because then I could still work with musicians, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then, so what kinds of things do you do to relax? You mentioned a couple of sports, but are there other things that you do to relax on the 7 minutes of downtime it sounds like you have a day?
Yeah, I'm kind of famous for having no downtime, because I do have, yeah. So the things, it's odd, the things that I choose to do to so-called relax. Well, listening to podcasts. So I've loved podcasts for years. I know they became really popular in COVID, but long before that, because I walk a lot. I love taking walks, and podcasts are one of my kind of things that I like to do when I'm walking. And I mentioned biking. So I've always been in either cycling groups, so mostly road biking and mountain biking. And those are kind of my downtime. I don't watch like a lot of TV, or it's pretty rare. Sometimes I can get sucked into like a Netflix show or something, but
yeah, it happens.
It does happen, especially in the summer and, during break times. Yeah.
And then if you could travel anywhere in the world, like that, what's on your bucket list to go to, a place to go that you haven't been?
I'm kind of obsessed with Iceland. And
I get that answer a lot these
really?
days.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating place. And I mean, most people choose, a warm tropical location or something like that. But I mean, Iceland is just so fascinating to me. And I'm also really into environmental things and environmental studies. And I just feel like they're so ahead in so many ways.
Yes.
And just like the landscape. I mean, I've had friends go, They just said it's like being on the moon in some places. Like it's like a different
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. It's so distinctive.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm no fan of the cold, but I would put on my parka and go to Iceland.
Yeah.
Because it seems like such an amazing and fascinating place. It seems like, you could spend a lot of time there, even though it's a smallish sort of island. There are so many different things to do, and they're all like completely diverse,
Yeah.
and different from each other. So it's a fascinating place. I'm with you there.
Oh, right.
Well, this has been great. I so appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you if they want to ask you some questions or partake of your expertise that you've so beautifully displayed to us during this interview?
Oh, well, thank you. So the easiest place would probably be my website, which is mysoundpath.com. And on there's a contact form, so they can reach out to me there. So I would say that's the easiest.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've given us so much information, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor, like I said in the beginning. And
I always laugh when you say that. I don't know why.
Don't laugh. Say thank you.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. So I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a blast.
All right, fabulous.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Brandon's really happy to have Sylvia Borgo back with us. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Mark. Great to see you.
Great. So I've known Sylvia for maybe 4 years. Do you think it's been 4?
Maybe almost close to 4.
Yeah, close to 4. And ever since I've known Sylvia, she's always raved to me about this program called Semester at Sea. So we're going to do something a little different. It's a unique creative spotlight, and it's a study abroad program. So Sylvia, take it away and take us where you want to go with it.
Thank you, Mark. I'm so excited to talk about Semester at Sea. I think it's a fabulous option for students who are interested in studying abroad for a semester, and also really taking advantage of an incredible amount of resources and opportunities and the ethos that Semester at Sea brings to its students, which includes global mindedness and care for the planet and interconnectedness and interdisciplinary studies. But let me go ahead and start off with some just important miscellaneous fun facts. It was established in 1963, so it's closing in on 50 years of being a program available to students.
Did you say 63?
Yes, 1963.
So that's 60 years.
Oh my gosh, you were right, 60 years. I'm doing the math completely wrong. You're right.
That's amazing.
Yes, so 60 years, you're right. And it has changed a bit over those 60 years, as one might expect. One of the big changes has been how many universities have been involved in the program, meaning the home base office. But most importantly, the one thing that hasn't changed, as the name implies, it's that it is a semester-long program, Semester at Sea. And it is a program that translates to about 4 months, about 110 days experience, where students, and actually, I'll talk about the community a little bit later on in a few minutes, but students and the community take classes for approximately 50 days. So they're studying and going to classes and taking their courses for about 50 days. And then the other 50 days or so, they visit, on average, about 11 countries in 3, sometimes 4 different continents. So a little bit about that experience. The ship, when it is at sea, traveling from port to port, say, for example, Japan to Vietnam, that usually would take anywhere between 5 to 6 days where the ship is at sea. And that's when the students go to their classes, take exams, study, do projects, presentations, as one might expect in any classroom environment. And then once they arrive at the new port, say, for example, Kobe, Japan, the ship is in port for about 5 days. And that's when the students have an opportunity to engage in lots of activities while in port, while in the country, while in the city. 3 of those days, the students are guided by faculty. So for example, let's say, Mark, you are taking an econ class, in a theater class, in a psychology class. sometime during that 100-day program, you will be guided by a faculty member in one of the ports. So your psychology professor might take you to, let's say, a clinic in Japan, and they might take you to let's say your theater professor will take you to another excursion, another field program, they call it, let's say when you get to Cape Town, South Africa. So the other ports, the other 7 to 8 to 7 ports, you get to experience the city and the country as you wish, where you can sign up for programs which are led by the semester at sea staff and faculty, or you can simply travel on your own. Grab a bus ticket, a train ticket, book your own hotels or Airbnbs and explore the city and the country as you wish. So that's super exciting to have that option, basically 50 days studying and 50 days enjoying and interacting with the world.
So what age level is doing this?
Yes, fantastic. I'll go ahead and jump to the demographics now, because I think this will maybe perk the ears of some of your listeners. So it's basically high school graduates to postgrad. So it could be really anywhere between 17 years old to about 22, 23 years old on the student side. And the ship sails with anywhere between 500, 550, 600 students. But that's not the only portion that makes up the entire community. What's really even super exciting is that you have not only these gap year students, these 17, 18-year-olds that just graduated from high school and haven't stepped foot on a college campus. So you have those young ones, but you also have what we call the lifelong learners on semester at sea. And the lifelong learners can really essentially be anyone 18 and over, but most of that demographic tends to be in the 50s, 60s, 70 years old, professionals, people who have retired and who really want to sail like a student, and learn and enjoy and see, like I mentioned, 10, 11 ports during a 4-month span. So those are the lifelong learners. And then you also have, actually, I mentioned that the 17-year-olds are the young ones, but actually we even have a younger cohort of possible travelers. And that usually is the dependent students of the faculty or the staff. So for example, if you were a professor, Mark, and you were teaching psychology, and you could bring your 2 daughters in, let's just imagine this was 10 years ago when they were still in like high school and middle school, you could bring them on. So they've even had sailors that are as young as like infants to, about 3 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. And those are the dependent students of the faculty and the staff. So that's another part of the demographics. So you have the students, the lifelong learners, the faculty and staff, and the RA, they have a residential life team. They have RAs. They have, of course, a doctor. And they have, of course, the field office staff, which helps with all of those programs that engage the students and the lifelong learners. But let me not forget a very, very important of this portion of this community. And that's the amazing, amazing crew. We're talking about everybody from the ship captain to the dining room staff, to the staff that helps with laundry and technology and library and food and just an incredible amount of amazing professionals that make the entire voyage memorable and safe, most importantly.
So with these different ages, are they sort of like segregated into enclaves? Or do people like interact? Because it sounds like there's almost like could be retirees here, like in 50s and 60s, with like an 18-year-old maybe doing a gap semester or something.
Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head. This is what's really, really incredibly beautiful about this experience. Yes, of course, it's exciting to know that you're going to be going to Japan and Vietnam and India and Cape Town, South Africa. But what's actually, many people say that what's even more exciting is the incredible interaction that happens on the ship. So yes, you were talking about these lifelong learners, these possible retirees engaging with not only the 18, 20, 21-year-old students, but even the younger students that I mentioned, those toddlers and so forth. So yes, you get, I'm going to get to the cost in a little bit, but that includes room and board. So when you are going to grab your lunch, you could be sitting next to this lifelong learner, or you could be sitting next to that psychology professor you're taking a class with. And these lifelong learners are usually professionals, retirees, and so forth that have a vast amount of experience in every single field. Former CEOs, current CEOs, lawyers, doctors, former teachers, really just a wealth and wealth of experience and knowledge that is on the ship that is coming from not only those young students, but of course the faculty, but also these incredible lifelong learners. I'd love to tell you a little bit more about how they integrate these communities, if that's okay.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so let me jump to this co-curricular student life section that I had jotted down some notes with, because there are not enclaves. Yes, of course, the students hang out with the students because they're of similar age and experience and they're taking courses. But it is very easy to interact with the lifelong learners. And the lifelong learners, it's very easy to interact as well with the faculty and the students and the staff. So for example, one thing that happens that is super cool, this is why I would want to go back on semester at sea as a lifelong learner, is nightly seminars take place. And these are held in the giant ballroom that can hold about 600 students or 600 attendees. But these nightly seminars are basically discussions and talks given by a faculty member, and usually in their field of experience. So you have somebody who, say, for example, is a musicologist, ethnomusicologist, and they're talking about the impact of the, let's say, for example, Afro-Cuban diaspora or something like that. I mean, these are really incredible opportunities for everybody to engage with. So these nightly seminars are incredibly exciting. They've also have guest speakers, very famous guest speakers. For example, Archbishop Desmond Tutu sailed about 10 years ago. Mother Teresa was a speaker as well. So we're talking about like really amazing figures in history that have had an impact on this community. And then, of course, let me mention some of the super fun stuff that everybody gets to engage in. There's a really cool program called the Sea Olympics, and that is held when the students, staff, faculty, if they have never sailed before or they have not yet crossed the equator, that's apparently a very momentous time in a sailor's life when you get to cross the equator the first time. And that's when Semester at Sea holds the Sea Olympics. And it's just a set of competitions, a whole day, crowned by a delicious barbecue at the very end of the day. And the Sea Olympics is really just a set of teams. And these could be multi-age teams. So you have the kids with the lifelong learners and the students and the faculty and the staff. And you do things like pie eating contest or Jeopardy or tug of war or solving a Rubik's Cube, really just fun little activities that anybody can take a part of. So those are fantastic opportunities. There's also a talent show. Again, anybody can join the talent show, and often every single age group is represented. And then, of course, there are also, at the very end of the voyage, there's kind of a formal dinner, kind of like a prom, if you will, but not really. Yeah, but a formal dinner where every age, students, faculty, staff, lifelong learners, they come together and everybody dresses up as best as they can, and it has a super nice sit-down dinner. So this hopefully showcases how interconnected every single member of the voyage is.
A question about the courses. Are these for credit courses that someone can get college credit for, or is it just sort of voluntary learning with no college credit capabilities?
Yeah, excellent question, because honestly, let's get back to the really important stuff, which is the academics, right? Yes. So it wouldn't surprise you to know that there's a many opportunities to enjoy several different courses. You have classes that are, in econ, marketing, business, anthropology, communications, journalism, psychology, even languages, like, for example, Spanish, certainly global studies, international relations, and even courses in theater or music or film appreciation and so forth. So these kind of sound probably to you like lots of different categories and easily accessible to all, where a student can certainly fulfill, at the very least, general ed requirements with these courses. But as with anything in college, in the college world, it depends, right? It really depends on the host the primary campus and what they will honor. But this is a great opportunity for you to reach out to your study abroad office at your own campus and coordinate with them what courses will be easily accepted at your home institution.
And I think you said earlier that some go to like 3 or 4 continents or something like that. So are there different, I guess there's different destinations, right? Like, are there multiple semester at sea programs going on all over the place and they leave from different countries, or is there like just like one place everybody goes to, Japan or San Diego or something for the departure place?
Yeah, excellent. Yes, you're thinking port cities, right? And glad you mentioned
Yes.
San Diego and so forth. A few years ago, I want to say it was maybe 2019, maybe it must have been 2019, where the ship did depart from San Diego and then headed west. So crossed the Pacific Ocean. Their first port was Japan. The first port was Hawaii and then Japan, because that is quite a long stretch there. They had to stick to Hawaii in there, and then continued on in Asia and the southwest of Asia, India, and then went around to the south of Africa. So hitting not only a couple of other ports like Mauritius and Cape Town, South Africa, and then circling back around the Atlantic side over to Ghana and Senegal and Morocco. So the question, how many ships are going on at the same time? It's only one ship. It's right now, Semester at Sea is being hosted on the World Odyssey. That's the name of the ship. And it's this gorgeous, gorgeous ship. Just think of the Love Boat, the cruise ship, but on a very, very tiny, tiny scale. As a matter of fact, sometimes when the ship is in port, the students living in it say like, "Oh, this is a huge ship." I feel like I have so much space, but then you see it next to these giant like cruise ships, and it's just a fraction of the size of a cruise ship. But yes, so it's only one ship. And typically it moves. So the voyage that I just described, departing, say, from San Diego, it moves from the east to west and then west to east. So the San Diego ship will finish off, for example, its voyage in Germany, and then the next voyage will depart from Germany and then head towards the west coast of California, or some modification of that. In recent years, especially during COVID, there were quite a few itinerary changes, as one might imagine, as COVID spread around the world, and especially in Asia during that March 2020 season.
Friends, this completes the first half. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Monday's episode, I want to share a few words about early action. I've been thinking about early action quite a bit lately and talking with a lot of admission officers about early action, and I want to share some thoughts that I don't recall ever having shared on the podcast before. And then we'll transition to a brand new interview, and it's with David Marcus. He's an author, a podcast listener who reached out to us and asked if he could come on the podcast, and we normally turn down 99% of those requests, but I'd actually read David's book about a decade ago. He wrote a book called Acceptance. A legendary guidance counselor helps 7 kids find the right colleges and find themselves. And I find he's really philosophically aligned with our concept of fit and match. I think you'll enjoy it. It'll be a 3-parter, and it'll start on Monday. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. But it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That's what's going to determine your career trajectory. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.